You only do because God allows it.
Did he allow that?
It was the thing that interested me about the project. It was the person, not necessarily every aspect of the original script that I was sent. So I started by looking into him, and then I went to Rome and I spent some time talking to friends of his and people who work with him. It was his real life story that I connected to. So a lot of those elements of that are in the movie now were brought to the film based on the research I did. I've read the first 2 books, so I've got another 10 to go. We'll see if it comes up again. Well, I might read some more. But, I read a lot of articles. Obviously, he wrote hundreds, but not all of them have been translated into English. Yeah, so for me, it was, the core compelling aspect was the life of Gabriele Amorth, From his hometown in Modena, he goes to Rome at 17. He says, I've been called by God. The priest at the Brotherhood that he went to said, you're too young. You've got nothing to teach people, So go away and get some life experience. He goes back to Modena. It's 1942. Second World War is raging. He ends up joining the resistance. He becomes a partisan fighter against the fascists. Now this man who had this calling to God has a gun in his hand and he's shooting to kill. He gets wounded through that experience. He loses a lot of his friends. Kids that he grew up with just die around him. He comes out of that experience with quite significant survivor's guilt. As he says in the film, to die in a war is heroic. To survive a war is complex. Out of the war, he goes to law school, does a law degree, completes his law degree, then becomes a journalist and goes back to that same, priest that he saw, 10 years earlier and says, I still have this calling. And he says, well, now it's perfect. Now you have these life experiences. You've seen things. When people come to you in their times of trouble, you will have some wisdom and some empathy. And then to be tapped on the shoulder at the age of 60 or something, to become an exorcist. And he had no experience of that beforehand. And he didn't quite understand what was going on, but the man who chose him, Father Candido, was so absolute in his choice. He was like, Gabriele, I know it's you. It has to be you. And he goes, well, but why? How can it be me? I don't have that background. And his explanation to Gabriele was basically about what was in his heart. And to me, it comes down to these 2 things, the purity of his faith and his sense of humor. So, and that combination to me was kind of, that felt like it was going to be fun. Well, Peter was great. I mean, he had no experience coming to the film. I think it was his first big gig, but he really took to it. The funny thing about Peter, he's a very pleasant young man and very easy company, but I would notice a change in his energy when he was just playing the character as a normal boy prior to demonic possession. And then he told me one day, he just says, I prefer the days when I'm the demon.
My faith does not require defense.